What's up, guys? It's me again, History with the Cardinal. And today we're going to be here with the Greco-Persian Wars again. I realized that the last video I did was too short, and I didn't really need to make this into a multiple-part series for the kind of videos I'm trying to do, which are really just short history videos on topics that interest me, but I also try to make it funny. Anyways, I realized that the last videos were kind of not that interesting and they were missing a lot, so I reformatted it, added some information. Essentially, this should be a lot better now. Without further ado, let's get into it. The Greco-Persian Wars by History of the Cardinal. Start with the background, like in any history class, regardless of if the teacher makes it super boring or not. So after the collapse of this civilization called Mycenae, that had ruled an area near Greece, many Greeks fled to Asia Minor because a semi-dark age had started in Greece. The Greek cities in Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey, by the way, if you don't know your geography, so they were later reinstated as like official Greek territory, but the Ionian group of Greek heritage was conquered or completely vassalized by the country of Lydia. Lydia was then attacked and confined to Western Asia Minor by a different country called the Medians. And then the Medians were overthrown by a new guy on the playing field, Prince Cyrus of Persia. When the Ionians refused to join Cyrus's consequential war against the country of Lydia, he just conquered them along with Lydia, obviously leading to civil unrest as they were tired of being conquered by pretty much every nation near them. Yeah. Civil unrest continued to grow in Ionia because the people tired of not being able to rule themselves, essentially. So, Spark Rebellion was this Persian tyrant, which was a term for mayor in Persia. If you're from America, a mayor who leads a city. Anyway, he ruled one of the Ionian cities, and his name was Aristogoras. He led a rebellion because he defended one of the other tyrants, and he saw that he was about to get in major trouble, so this was really, in his eyes, his last chance to regain any power. So he led a rebellion to overthrow King Cyrus of Persia in 499 BC. With Athenian and Eretrian support, those are two city-states in Greece mainland, the Ionians took and razed Sardis, but Persia then brought its full force to bear on the rebellion. They had multiple successes, and then they walked straight into a gigantic ambush and lost nearly their entire army. There was a stalemate for 2 years as Persia tried to regroup. War machine broke. And then, after part of the rebel faction defected, and the Persians regroup, the rebels are swiftly crushed. Most of their navy was defeated in a decisive battle off the coast of their capital, and then when their capital was taken, most of the remaining rebels defected, except for a few coastal city enclaves that were besieged until they surrendered or starved to death. The first invasion of Greece. One does not simply invade Greece, he said, trying to imitate that guy from the Lord of the Rings series, but doing a really bad job of it because he couldn't remember his accent. And narrating himself for no apparent reason. Anyway, so just a year later, Cyrus decides that Athens and Eretria must be punished for helping the Ionians, and that Greece is a threat to him. I don't really see that, but I mean, at the time, Greece did have one of the most advanced armies in the world, but it was very small. Anyways, he essentially just sends 2 armies in without many prior battle plans. General Mardonius, just basically using sheer force of numbers, takes back Thrace, which would be the area in modern-day Turkey where Istanbul is. You can look that up on a map if you want to know. And then Macedon, which is near Istanbul. It's the part of Greece that runs under that area. And also the modern-day country of Bulgaria. Actually, it's now its own independent nation. But then it was part of Greece. So after taking Macedonia, he was wounded in battle and lost almost his entire fleet to a storm and retreated. So, really the much more unsuccessful invasion of Datis and Tryphanes happened. They invaded at Marathon, but they were on a giant plain surrounded by hills. The Greeks had many less soldiers, but they had the terrain advantage. The Persians were unwilling to charge, so after a few days, I believe, they retreated. I know they retreated, I just don't remember exactly how long it was. So they retreated their cavalry, which were their strongest soldiers, onto the boats that they'd landed them with, and then the Greeks charged and killed 6,400 Persians and took only about 200 casualties, and forced the Persians to retreat back to Persia. This crossed over. Yay. Second invasion of Greece inventive naming, guys. After 10 years of preparation, the Persians crossed back to Greece on pontoon bridges, this time under the ruler Xerxes because Cyrus died in a rebellion. The Greeks lose at the Battle of Thermopylae. That's your the movement from 300, except looking at it historically, there were actually 2,000 people there. However, the Spartan king did actually have his personal bodyguard of 300 that he stayed behind with to try and hold the pass. One of the only reasons that they lost the battle was because the Persians paid off a local Greek man, to tell them about a mountain path that went around and, to the side. It allowed them to get on the flank of the defenders. So most of the army retreated, while the Spartan king remained with his personal bodyguard and about 1,700 more guys. They lost the battle, but they inflicted many more casualties than they took. They whittled down a lot of Xerxes' army before he even got close to his main objectives. And at a naval battle that was going on at the same time, where the Greeks were trying to keep the Persians from landing troops that could come behind their forces in the Battle of Thermopylae at the time, both navies lost a good portion of their ships. So the Greeks fell back to Salamis because after Thermopylae there weren't very many good defensive points. Athens was captured and razed because most of their army had retreated to that, basically what they were turning into an island fortress on Salamis. So the Greeks then devastated the Persian navy in the Strait of Salamis because the Persian navy was so large that it struggled to maneuver. It was a small strait. The Persians had many fewer ships. The Greeks had many fewer ships. Not even sure if that's correct English, but let's go with it. So the Greeks were essentially able to just repeatedly ram the Persians with their galleys, and the Persians couldn't do all that much about it because they tried to fit so many ships in that tiny strait at the same time that only an eighth of them could move at any given time. Then King Xerxes, this was the guy beating Persia, if you forgot, retreated his main army, and what he left of his army and navy were completely outsmarted and obliterated by the remaining Greek forces. So the Greek counterattack in the Delian League Wars, which was the end of the Persian Wars. The Greeks then counterattacked. They just took back their Ionian cities and some territory in Byzantium and did some raids on Cyprus. They didn't actually gain much territory that they hadn't had before this entire set of wars started, but they did retake their land. And after Sparta and the Peloponnesian city-states leave the Greek alliance, Athens formed its own Delian League with many of the Aegean island city-states. The Athenians formed the Delian League into their own empire and continued to fight Persia until 451 BC, where after two astonishing victories, but a critical defeat in achieving their main objective at Memphis in Egypt, the war ended. So, I kind of find this a very interesting history period, simply because, aside from all the interest around the Battle of Thermopylae, because it's the basis of the story about the 300 Spartans holding off, like 100,000 Persians. Even though it wasn't entirely true, because there were definitely more Greek soldiers there, that's kind of personally fascinating to me, and it's also kind of an underdog story. The Greeks had many less troops and many less naval forces, but because they had better technology and because they used strategy, they were able to overcome a much larger and more powerful force than most people would have been able to. And they even managed to push back and take some Persian lands, even though in the beginning they'd been struggling to survive. It's kind of a historic underdog story. I know that Persia was actually not that bad of a ruler most of the time, or at least the king was not a bad ruler. I know some of the tyrants who ruled over Persian cities were. Persia was not actually that bad of a nation, but they did essentially try and conquer Greece for not joining their war. And they didn't have an alliance or anything before, so that's a completely unreasonable response. I like the story. And I think it's personally interesting. If you want to learn more about this, there's probably many other videos out there. But, that's my video. My, revision of the terrible video I put out yesterday, and be back with you soon, guys. Bye-bye.